Good afternoon. I'm Rob Curley, editor of the Spokesman-Review, and we're about to begin one of our virtual Northwest Passages community forums. Today, we have Representative Cathy McMorris Rodgers, who is going to be talking with us for 30 minutes. Please submit your questions if you'd like. You can do that on our site right below us. And I want to get out of the way and let everyone talk. So I'd like to introduce one of our senior reporters, Kip Hill, who will be leading the discussion. So thank you both, and can't wait to shut up and listen.
All right, thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. And Congresswoman, thanks for taking time. I know there's a lot going on right now, and I guess that's kind of where I wanted to start. What are the discussions right now about what a next package or assistance package might look like at the federal level, and when might Congress be acting on that?
Sure. Well, the discussions are underway right now. The Senate returned this week. The House has decided not to. The House has been doing some meetings virtual. We've been having regular conference calls, Zoom sessions with the Energy and Commerce Committee. Earlier today, I was on a call with the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve. So there's a lot of things that are underway. Certainly, the impact of the coronavirus, the public health crisis, the economic crisis, and the multiplier impact of it continues to be felt here in Eastern Washington and all over the country. And Congress is discussing what should be next. And I am sure that Congress will be continuing to respond and best meet the needs. I think it's important to reflect that Congress has already passed 4 major packages, relief packages in response to the coronavirus beginning early on in March, and a big focus on the Paycheck Protection Program, which has been geared towards helping businesses and other entities due to no fault of their own that have been forced to close. So yes, there's a lot going on. One area that I have focused on is with agriculture. I joined Peter DeFazio out of Oregon to ask for the PILT funding and the SRS funding to be made a part of next package. There's also legislation that I've joined with my colleague in Washington State, Kim Schreier, on the Farmers Feeding Families Act. But there's a lot underway right now, clearly still responding and anticipating what might be next.
Talk a little bit more about those agricultural packages. You mentioned a couple payments in there. Is the idea to kind of help? I know farmers are not really sure what the markets are going to look like when all this kind of reopens, and how they get their products to stores and all that kind of stuff. Is that what this is intended to help, or what would those changes likely do for farmers here in Eastern Washington?
Yes, well, the legislation that I mentioned that I'm leading with Kim Schreier from Washington State, the Farmers Feeding Families, that is legislation that would empower our state Department of Agriculture directors to be able to purchase product directly from farmers to be used in food banks and other areas where we are focused on really meeting fundamental food needs of individuals and families. So right now, potato farmers, we have a lot of potatoes. Potatoes that normally would be sold to restaurants are not being sold. We have a lot of potatoes in storage, 3 million tons of potatoes, and this would be a way to potentially be able to buy the potatoes and get them where the needs are most. And farmers have been plowing up potato fields. You've been hearing about that. Dairy farmers that have milk that isn't being distributed. So I think our focus right now is to give farmers some confidence, some certainty, but also to continue to meet the real needs that people have to be fed.
Yeah. If I could ask you specifically something I've reported on, and something your colleague, Congressman Newhouse has talked about. Some of these folks that didn't get stimulus assistance packages, who are in fact U.S. citizens, but are married to people who don't yet have Social Security numbers. They have children who are U.S. citizens but don't have Social Security numbers. Is that something you've taken a look at, and where do you come down on that as related to what Congressman Newhouse said?
Right. We have taken a look at that. we reached out when it was brought to our attention, and it is true that the way the CARES Act was written, the $1,200 assistance to the individual, if a couple or a family, but if they had filed jointly, the U.S. citizen and then the person that was here maybe on a visa, the U.S. citizen, even though they're a citizen and have the social security number, would not get that check. I think it's a loophole that I would be in favor of correcting to make sure that we, those that were intended to receive that support would get it.
Specifically for the U.S. citizen and their child, making sure they get that assistance for that.
Yes.
Because that's what Representative Newhouse said. I know he's had some folks come forward with him because of migrant populations and workers in Central Washington. So I just wanted to be clear on exactly what that is.
Yes,
okay.
Right. We looked into that too.
Yeah. So let me ask you, I mean, there's all of this federal assistance coming down. For a long time, you've been in Congress and raised concerns about the deficit and the debt. Is that guiding your thinking at all in how you look at these relief packages that are coming in? And is there a spot where we say we can't provide that assistance anymore because it's going to be a major issue down the line?
It is true that we have spent a lot of money. It's unprecedented, the amount of money that we have spent, and the deficits that we are looking at for this year are record high. The accumulation of debt, absolutely, it is of concern to me, and I believe that it must be addressed. I believe that it will have a negative impact on us and our children, and it will reduce our future opportunities. You think about in the future when we want to be investing in infrastructure or education or whatever it may be, we'll have these debt payments that we've saddled upon our children and our grandchildren. So I'm absolutely concerned about it. I'm on a budget group of members that have been meeting via Zoom over the last few weeks, bipartisan members that are looking at what are some reforms that we should be promoting right now as we continue to respond to the coronavirus, but make sure that we have some fiscal reforms in place so that we are paying attention to that. Having said that, I would also, part of the reason that I supported the spending and the relief packages is because we have to get our economy. We have to take care of our economy. We'll never be able to pay our debt, make our debt payments unless we have an economy that is booming and growing, and businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses that have invested a life's worth of work due to no fault of their own, had the government come around and close them. And I believed that we needed to take action to protect the payrolls, to protect those individuals, as well as help these businesses get through this period of time. And that's why I supported the fast relief to try to save as many of those businesses as possible.
Let me ask you about the economy and all of that, because that's become the point of some, quite frankly, frustration of people here in Spokane, people in Olympia, people in Washington State, concerned about, how long we've been shut down. They've been having protests in public locations. Do you think that people have the right to protest those orders from Governor Inslee? And what do you think of those protests?
Well, certainly we believe in freedom of speech. We believe in freedom of the press, and absolutely people have the right to protest. I think we all have a responsibility to be doing our part to stop the spread and to be wise as it relates to the coronavirus. I'm on regular calls with the governor, and I was on a call again with him this morning with the delegation, with the House and Senate members. And I was appealing to him for more flexibility in Eastern Washington in particular. We have voluntarily agreed and have abided by the stay home, stay healthy orders. On Friday, he made the announcement and listed 10 counties that would have the ability to jump to phase 2 quicker. Quite honestly, and I told him, there's a lot of confusion and frustration coming out of his press conference on Friday, because a lot of counties, and I mentioned Stevens County specifically, Whitman County, but also Spokane County, where there's this sense that the emergency and the emergency order that the governor has used to impose the stay home order, that the emergency doesn't exist in this, and that there needs to be more flexibility to look at what's actually happening on the ground and take the appropriate steps. And you know, he said Stevens County was especially hard for him, that, you know, they're kind of on the bubble. But Colville, Washington is shut down. Main Street is shut down right now while the Walmart is open and their parking lot is full. And that's where I appealed to him that if he could get the guidelines out so that businesses on Main Street could open and operate. If it's limiting the number of people in the business, so be it. If I appealed to him for the car dealers, the Toyota in Coeur d'Alene's having a record year. Our car dealerships are shut down, and they've offered guidelines. So maybe by appointment only, or if they clean the car every time, but we want to operate safely, but we need more flexibility right now. And the governor said he was working, he's looking at it. Our county commissioners, our public health officers in Eastern Washington, our healthcare leaders are working right now to figure out, what can we do? What can we do safely? And I just hope that the governor will provide even more flexibility to more counties in Eastern Washington.
As was his response to that, just that we don't have, because the thing I've been hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is one of the concerns about reopening that is we don't have the capabilities to test people to the degree to make it safe at this point. Is that a concern that's been raised, and has that been discussed at the state level?
Well, certainly. That has been a long time. Well, from the very beginning, we've needed more testing. We've needed the PPEs. I think in Eastern Washington right now, many of these counties have not seen the surge that at one point we were preparing for. We've not seen the numbers that they've seen in Eastern or Western Washington, in Puget Sound and Seattle. And the governor recognized that. He said, we have not seen the hospitalizations, and he said that he told me that he was going to continue to work with the local elected officials and the public health officers and see what flexibility we could put in place here to really respond to what's happening on the ground. And as I talk to hospital administrators, many of them are anxious to get open again and to be able to do elective surgeries in particular, to be able to expand, because they've had to lay off. They've had to lay off doctors and nurses, and and they people have real healthcare needs that also need to be addressed. So there's trade-offs in all of this, and I think I think that the governor is hearing from Eastern Washington that it's time for more flexibility.
Let me ask you, you mentioned PPE, which has been a big thing, and we have a reader question here from Jesse. Basically, is the federal government competing with states for PPE supplies? And what can the federal government do to encourage PPE production?
Right. So this has been a state-managed response. So state-managed, locally implemented, and federally supported. And I have been on regular calls, both with the governor as well as the FEMA regional administrator, and then also with people in DC. So whether it's Secretary Azar or the Director of NIH or CDC, at the federal level, the federal government has also been, we've used our stockpiles, which weren't nearly enough. No one anticipated this kind of a need, but the president and the administration has been working to ramp up the production, the manufacturing of PPE and masks in America. It has been a real wake-up call. I think everyone has been shocked to learn the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses of our supply chain, and especially our dependence upon China, that so much of what we need in medical supplies and medical equipment is now made in China. And last week I was on a call with Secretary Azar where he was highlighting that we got to get serious about doing more of this in America, but that is part of what's taken so long to ramp up. So you have governors that are purchasing from other countries, while the federal government is all hands on deck, both on the public side, on the testing, as well as on the private side to ramp up production.
Since we talked a little bit about World Health and all that kind of stuff in that answer, there's another question from a reader. It has to do with President Trump's suspension of the funds to the World Health Organization. I know that's something you've addressed. The reader is Robert, and he says he's a proud Spokenite living in a developing country, which was slated to receive assistance money to fight COVID-19 through support of WHO programs. Roger asks, do you believe President Trump's suspension of all funds to the WHO is the most efficient and effective way to create change in the WHO when this assistance is going to direct support of programs in poorer countries?
Well, I do support the president's action because the World Health Organization, we need to find out what happened. And what the Trump administration has said is that we're going to suspend the funding until there's an opportunity for an investigation, and that we have more answers. What happened in China and why there was such a delay, why there was false information early on about the coronavirus and how it would be transmitted, and why the World Health Organization did not expose that and did not provide the transparency that we needed. We need to get some answers because what has happened as a result of early decisions and the decisions that were made and the lack of transparency and the lack of sharing of information with China and with the WHO, with the World Health Organization, it has caused an even more dramatic impact both on our country as well as the entire world. And so I do support the administration's action and believe that we need answers.
So we should suspend the funding up until that point. And I think the point of Senator Risch was, who's worked a little bit with the president on this or talked to him about it, was that the idea was that this suspension of funding is not stopping our response to COVID-19. It just is directed through other paths, maybe through states or something like that. Is that your understanding? Or?
Well, I know that we do help countries all over the world, and we are helping right now. While we are continuing to ramp up and meet our own country's needs and our needs here in Eastern Washington with medical equipment, medical supplies, PPE, and testing, we are also helping other countries around the world. That's happening right now.
Let me shift gears just a little bit. One of the things you said, it's exposed previously, this virus has exposed sort of our maybe vulnerability in the supply chain for health supplies. I think
Yes.
One of the other things that's exposed is the lack of broadband internet that we have in rural areas, and that we were kind of behind the curve on that. I know that's something you've addressed in the past. How does this crisis, I guess, how will that paint our discussion about extending that moving forward, and what are you hearing about the eagerness now to make sure that some of these rural areas like Stevens County and even Ponderay and Ferry counties get better access to high-speed internet so we can have these types of meetings in the future?
Right. Rural broadband was already a priority issue, and the coronavirus has only underscored the importance of us closing the digital divide. And it is real on the ground in Eastern Washington. I have talked with superintendents in Eastern Washington who estimate 50% of the kids don't have access to the internet. And as we all recognize, we're doing school at home. I have 3 school-age kids at home, and we're battling for iPads and computer and all that. But we live in Spokane, and we have internet. And you think about the challenges of not having internet access, not having that broadband infrastructure. WSU has now, they're doing Wi-Fi hotspots wherever they have centers. So that's helping meet that need. But telehealth, Congress took action to open up telehealth, which was great. So that telehealth would be reimbursed during this coronavirus at the same as any other healthcare procedure. That's great. I was talking with New Health Systems that provide a lot of the support in the northeast portion of Washington State. They said, we have doctors that are now wanting to be able to use telehealth, but we don't have the broadband capacity to do video conferencing. So they're stuck doing telephone consultations. So whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's basic business, economic development in our future, clearly this is infrastructure, basic infrastructure that we need. And the coronavirus has only underscored that. I worked on legislation that President Trump actually signed just in March that was around, it was called the Broadband Data Act. And it included legislation that I had introduced around the mapping. The maps were all wrong that we were using to allocate precious federal dollars for closing the digital divide. So this legislation is going to ensure that our maps are accurate. The maps that we're currently using show Spokane County is 100% covered. You get outside of the city of Spokane, go south towards Rockford or Fairfield. You don't have to go down there very far, and you don't have cell phone coverage, right? Let alone broadband. Stevens County, 100% covered. Ferry County, 97% covered. Obviously, these maps are not accurate. So that was step one, was to get more accurate maps. And I would say that this is a huge priority all across the country as I talk to my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, that we must close the digital divide. And this has underscored it more than ever.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. I'd like to pop in another reader question here. I know, and I had seen this, but I don't know how recent this proposal is, but this question comes to us through Jim Camden, who's our Olympia reporter, former reader. The president has proposed a payroll tax holiday, and that person is concerned that if there is a payroll tax type holiday, the funding for critical federal programs, Social Security, Medicare systems, those might be problematic, or skipping the money that might be collected during that holiday. What do you think of that idea? Is that concerning to you?
Well, I know that the president has been talking about a payroll tax holiday. The president and his administration, his team is really looking at proposals that will incentivize people coming out of this time of crisis. So especially small business owners and other entrepreneurs, startups. And one proposal is the payroll tax holiday. I want to hear more about it. I want to hear more about the impact that it would have on the federal budget and meeting our, obviously how we meet the obligations, not just the commitments that we have made in so many of the programs that you just listed. And that absolutely has to be a priority. We have to make sure that we can meet the commitments that we have made through Social Security and Medicare. We have 20,000 people signing up for Social Security every day right now in Medicare. And so we have the baby boomers retiring, and we got to be able to meet those obligations. So I'll take a look at it. It's one of the proposals that is under consideration, and all part of how we take these next steps.
Well, let me just ask one more question, and then I'll let you kind of have any last comments you'd have for our viewers. But you mentioned your time at home with the kids. My kids have just downloaded Disney Plus, and we're plowing our way through that backlog. What are you doing with your family? What are you reading? What are you watching right now to kind of get, if in the few brief moments you have where you're not focused on federal policy?
Well, we too, Kip, have recently downloaded Disney Plus.
You gotta get it, right?
I should say I'm quite impressed with how the schools have responded so quickly, and it's given me a a renewed appreciation for their teachers and just everything that they provide our kids and making sure that they are learning and growing. And it's certainly challenging having 3 school-age kids at home right now, day in and day out. It's not a quiet, peaceful, relaxing time.
No, it's not.
But our kids, fortunately, the weather has improved, and they've been able to get out and do some bike rides, and they love to play basketball in the backyard. And we're incentivizing them to read. We've been incentivizing them with some financial incentives to read some books, and sometimes they respond to that better than other days. And they've been enjoying a program called Duolingo, which is great, which is a program that helps them learn another language. So they've enjoyed that. And I'm trying to think what other ones they like. Prodigy, and I'm learning about some of the new apps that are available to kids. But we do battle screen time and trying to make sure that they are also playing with their Legos and being creative downstairs. They like to make forts and completely destroy the house. And so, they're being creative though, right?
So I got to ask you, what was the last thing you watched on Disney Plus then?
We watched the last one. Let's see here. It was Tangled. Which
yes,
so we
puzzle,
watched.
Right?
Yeah, that was on Friday night. That was our movie night Friday night. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'll just toss it out to any other messages you want to send. We just got a few more minutes there, and then let Rob kind of wrap up here. But anything else you want to let the folks who are watching know that you're working on in Congress right now?
Well, sure. Thank you for today. And more than anything, I want to just say that this has been a really difficult time. And there's been a lot of loss, a lot of fear. There's still a lot of fear of the unknown. And I, every day, get to hear the stories of American ingenuity and creativity, people in Eastern Washington that are stepping up to meet the needs of their neighbors, to help solve problems. Early on, it was a kid in Newport, Washington, who had figured out how on his 3D printer to produce masks, or dry fly, which I know the Spokesman did a story on dry fly, converting their distillery into hand sanitizer, and other business leaders that have been working to get PPE here, and how to convert maybe their operations so that they can produce and meet the needs of our community. And that has really been inspiring, and it's been heartening. And I know that we're going to get through this. This is a time when we're going to have to come together. This has been a huge hit to our country. It's been a huge hit to our confidence and that entrepreneurial spirit. We've celebrated the risk takers in America in years past, and right now those risk takers are taking it really hard. And there's a lot of needs. There's a lot of needs. I visited Second Harvest not too long ago, and it was a pretty dire report as far as just what they anticipate the needs being going into summer. And so my encouragement is that this is a time when we have to be creative to think about how we can help our neighbors and meet those needs. But everything that we can do to provide hope, to provide confidence to people so that we can go about our lives and get back to solving problems and getting our business running again, the better. And that was part of what I encouraged the governor today, was that we need that hope. We need that confidence to be able to get back and really trust people. Yes, we want to do it safely, but we need to be taking those steps. So keep in touch, and let's keep building each other up and believing that tomorrow will be a brighter future.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for joining us, and Kip, thank you for doing that. We have a massive lineup of cool Northwest Passages events this week. And probably the most requested one we've ever had is for Spokane Health Officer Bob Lutz, which will be on Thursday. And we're returning to our roots as a glorified book club on Friday when we host SM Pulse. So I want to thank all of you who were here and who asked questions and watched, and I want to remind everyone that today is Giving Tuesday, and if you can give, you should, to your favorite charity, your favorite university, whatever, or give straight to Innovia and let them divvy it up. But I would also have you consider that you should donate to Northwest Passages. All of our events are free, and we do everything we can to make sure that we bring our community together for things like this. So thank you all. And again, Congresswoman, thank you, Kip. And I hope we can do this again sometime.
Sounds good.